right. Welcome back to Nonprofit Ad Day, take two. I am so excited for this upcoming session. I am thankful that Javan is joining us for Stop the Drop Off, How to Build Digital Journeys That Convert. Javan Van Gronigen is a prominent leader in digital innovation and brand advancement, and he serves as the founder and creative director of 50 and 50 and Donately. With a background as the former art director for respected firms like Digitaria and Miriam and Invisible Children, Javan launched 50 and 50 in 2009 to elevate nonprofits with top tier web design and branding. His strategic vision extends to Donately, where he drives initiatives to revolutionize fundraising through innovative digital solutions. Javan's unwavering commitment to positive change resonates in every product, leaving a lasting impact on the nonprofit sector. I am so excited for this session. Let's give it up for Javan in the chat. I want to see some hands clapping. I want to see some gifts going, all the emojis. And Javan, thank you so much for coming back to Nonprofit Ad Day Take Two, and I'll let you take it away.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Can you guys hear me okay? Think we're good. Can I get some reactions here? Thumbs up. I got a couple thumbs up, so it looks like we're on and running. We can hear me. Great. Perfect. So let's go ahead and jump in. Thanks for tuning in a second time. I know for a lot of you, probably hard to reschedule, so appreciate you giving me some time. Excited to jump into this. I know a lot of you have been listening in on elements of it's a bright yellow. I'm assuming we're responding to there, Toonie. We've been responding and looking at advertising, where we could be spending, what we could be doing, and I want to focus in a little bit here on what happens after the click, where are people going, what can we do to improve on how many people are converting as we move them through those journeys and funnels. So again, my name is Javan, creative director and founder of 50 and 50 and Donately. I'll go ahead and throw my information and a couple URLs here into the chat just to make sure if anybody wants them, they have them. Been doing this since about 2009, starting the agency world, and then Donately we spun up in around 2011, and really we're focused in on the services and the technology behind what we're doing with digital fundraising. And so eager to jump into this today. And feel free to throw questions in as I talk. I'll try to respond to them, or we'll find some time at the end here where we can look into it a little bit more. So let's start the session here with just this, what feels like a pretty crazy statistic to me, that 88% of visitors that are going to your donation pages and your landing pages, they do not complete a donation. So we're paying for these people. Oftentimes when we're doing advertising, we're showing them our content and our creative, but it is not converting. It is not moving the needle into a donation. So for the next 45 minutes, we're going to be looking at kind of what creates that drop-off problem, some of the industry trends, some of the things that people are doing to resolve that or solve for that, and give you some ideas and some quick tips on what you could be doing as organizations to see what we can do around converting as many of our leads and our potential donors as possible. So I want to define the drop-off problem first off, right? So when we talk about a drop-off, we talk about a conversion challenge. There's a lot of steps to that. What I really want to look at is toward the end of this, but really there's a lot of pieces, right? First off, we're getting in front of donors with advertisements, with social media, with our assets, owned media, inbound, outbound, a lot of things that we're doing that create impressions. The ad impressions obviously are being paid for. We are getting basic engagement on those. Are people seeing them? If it's social ads, are they clicking? Are they engaging with it? Are they then moving to our landing pages, moving to the locations where we are trying to convert them, typically gated content, or we're looking at donation forms? And then this last step, the holy grail here, is do they convert? Do they convert to a donor? And do we get them completely through that life cycle? So a lot of things that we can look at when it comes to moving from the number of impressions we're getting early on all the way down to how many conversions are we getting. So here's some of what kind of starts that drop off. The beginning here is the idea of poor targeting, this idea that we're putting ads in front of people that are never going to be donors. no matter how hard we try. So there's a lot we can look at. And I'm sure a lot of the conversations today have been around how to improve this. I'm not going to go too deep into this in the session today because I want to spend a little bit more time on the final piece of the conversion. But definitely, if you're attracting the wrong people, there's not a whole lot you can do once they come over to actually engage and convert them. Second is around the content and what you're using. So I'm going to show a lot of examples around landing pages, but a lot of the content, the images, the videos that you're using, even all the way up into the ads and where you're first reaching people, uh, they have to have a valuable story. And we're going to break apart what that looks like here in a little while. They have to have emotion. They have to have a very clear donor value proposition. And we'll think about some of the campaigns we've seen out there and how they show the donors what it is they're going to be doing with their gift. And again, that's focusing in on a donor conversion. There are a few different ways we can convert, but for now, we're going to look at this as a full conversion to a donor. Then we're going to look at the landing page itself and what are we doing there from a technology perspective. Is it laid out? Is it a good heuristic design? Do we have fast load speed? So we're going to dive into that as well. And then the final details is really just the conversion, the donation forms themselves, and are we doing enough to make those fast, easy to use? I think of it as the cash register. So as you leave the store, can you get in and out and actually make that transaction? Ooh, Kareem, that's a good question. We'll have to come back to that. I'm in a flow here, so I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back to that question here in a minute around neglecting filthy ads. So first, let's look at what people are doing in the space. So, couple trends. This is hard. There's a lot of ways to start to look at the challenges of drop off, but I wanted to at least focus on a few here. These three I think are pretty important. First off is what people are doing is they're recognizing how quickly they can come to market and really iterate and use technology to solve for the drop off and get higher conversions. So first off, failing. A lot of people say failing fast. I prefer to just consider it failing or testing fast, which is just getting things in market, getting ads in market. You've got all the data sets you need inside of the different ad platforms to recognize what's resonating, what's not. You can run Google dynamic ads to recognize all the different combinations of your assets, but the market and the cost for these ads is demanding that we move quickly. We find the best converting ads and we move to those and we start to focus our ad spend on those. Another thing we're seeing with a lot of our clients is the speed to which you can advertise on hot topics. This year has been packed with hot topics, whether it's political or it's shifts in budgets or it's um, international affairs. There are so many things that are moving really, really quickly in today's kind of fundraising ecosystem. And so the ability to get out and change where your ad spend is and be very topical to current events is something we're seeing prove very valuable. Is if you can jump in on the conversations right then, right when they're happening, really valuable to be topical in that space. And a tool that's being used to get there is AI, and there's a lot to unpack there. Whether that's AI for copy, AI for data, and scrubbing data for insights, but the AI and its different agents and capacities is really speeding people up so that you can look and get good insights on what is working and how quickly you can change in that space. Next is personalizing. And I know I kind of added this little privacy resilient targeting in here because I think that's important to recognize. It's getting harder and harder to do personalization, but I think in small targeted batches, you can speak specifically to donors that had attended things, donors that gave certain donation volumes, people who have engaged in certain aspects of the organization. Be specific and run smaller ad sets and ad batches so that you can personalize with who you're talking to, be very direct, and recognize too that you need to be doing that across multiple channels. So this personalization, if you break what you're doing down into smaller pieces, you need to be able to do that smaller groups, more channels, and we're seeing value in that over the much larger, hey, anybody who's come to our website, we're just going to remarket to them with broad language, tends to underperform in comparison to the more targeted approach. And then video, unless you're living under a rock, you're recognizing video is really taking over when it comes to the way in which you can do a lot of the storytelling, a lot of the content dissemination and just the engagements far higher. End users, donors are looking to engage in video content far more than they are in a, let's say, newsletter or graphic ad. And we have to remind ourselves even of that oftentimes is just how much better it is for content to be said, even in this format, right? Speaking, talking head videos really break through that idea of credibility and authenticity in an era where so much of the content online can be done with chat and with bots. Um, so let's look at a quick framework here on how you can tell if what you are building is going to resonate. It's kind of a framework that we use as an agency to ensure that what we're putting together as a user journey or an ad campaign is going to resonate, right? First off is clarity. Is it clear the purpose of the advertisements, the purpose of the messaging, and overall, like what is going to be done if somebody gives or somebody signs up? Is that clear? Does the donor or the end user see value in being involved in this campaign? And is it clear to them? Can they easily understand what they're being asked to do? Second is speed. So that's the speed in the copywriting that's being done. How quickly can you get your point across? How quickly can you tell your story? But then also technically, right? How fast can that page load? How quickly can we get the conversation done? You know, there's a stat in there, right? Every second we delay, we're losing conversion. We're losing up to 20%, which is just crazy how quickly we're going to lose people if we can't deliver quickly and loading the page, loading forms, and really moving people through that process. What content is on there has to build trust, right? Whether it's testimonials, whether it's videos, whether it's proof of the work being done on the ground, whether it's security, trust in the payment methods being secured, and badges that are showcasing that you're doing everything you need to do to protect their donor data and their privacy, transparency on where the money goes. All of that, I think trust is an uphill battle moving into this more AI centric world that we're walking into. So ensure that what you're doing there too is just calming people's nerves when it comes to giving you money online, and that they can trust you as an organization that's going to do what they say they're going to do. And then lastly, action. Do we have a clear CTA? Do we have a clear methodology for them to act? And really, we want to look at kind of from a behavior model, can the end user act? And there's a little diagram here. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but really, when we say, is it actionable? We have to look at the motivation of the end user and the ability for them to respond. So I'll pause on this just briefly to make sure it makes sense. Where we win is in the upper right quadrant of this. So when we have a prompt that is highly motivating and easy to do, that's where we're going to win over users from a behavior perspective. So if you really need it and it's really inexpensive, that's what you're going to buy. If you kind of need it and it's expensive or you can't see value in it, that's where your prompts or your actions are going to fail. And so what we want to do is just a quick test to ensure of our users, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, the people we've targeted, is this something that they are motivated to do, and do they have the capacity or ability to do it? And that goes to donation asks, right? If you have a smaller donor base, we shouldn't be asking them for $1,000. Our dollar handles should be much farther down to resonate with them in terms of what they can do or what they have the ability to contribute to. And then our language and our heart pulling on the heartstrings is that storytelling, and how do we motivate them to do that? So just a quick kind of model you can look into a little bit more if you want to, the fog behavior model, just to kind of understand how you're asking people to do things and what you're asking them to do. So the next section, I want to focus on two areas: technology that helps you convert, and services or things that you can do as part of your organization to make improvements to conversion. So first off, I'm going to lean into is technology. I'm going to be walking through Donately because it's our platform, and it's the one that I know the most intimately. But the ideas that we're going to be talking through, they resonate with all of the different giving platforms and page building platforms and marketing platforms. So this will be valuable regardless. So first off, we're going to talk about what a tech-enabled landing page should be able to do. We want to talk about what a pain-free giving experience can look like, and we want to talk a little bit about A/B testing to go back to what we said earlier about ensuring that what you're doing is actually paying off. So first off, I'm going to talk about a tech-enabled landing page. So what you see off to the right here is one of the templates of Donately. There are dozens in the marketplace, which I would encourage you to go look at. And maybe I could throw in the chat here really quick as a place to uh, sorry, I can't type and talk at the same time, marketplace.donately.com, to see different ideas for how to lay these pages out. We'll see a few more of these in the future, but this is one that we use quite often when it comes to trying to convert donors or using a paid landing page where we want to be very clear and very quick to get to a donation. So recommendations on our end, clean, simple headers. Oftentimes we want to pack in sliders and animations. I'm okay if it's a video. We do see that being valuable, but overdoing on the UX and putting too many components into the pages just seems to make the page too long, too much time to get to the point. So we want clear titles, clear descriptions, really quick content. No distractions on functionality. It's clear above the fold what we're trying to accomplish here. And I will admit too, as a designer, it's a hard sell for me to always try to pack things in and have our team pack this stuff in above the fold. But really, from a conversion perspective, what you put above the fold is going to be the focal point. So this form actually follows you down the page. It never, steps out of view. And everything we're doing is really driving people towards this is specifically what we're asking for. Also, you don't want any additional functionality, no other kind of asks. We want to be specific. We want to be short and sweet. And some of the elements on the page that also build that trusting credibility we were talking about. This particular design has a progress bar. It shows how much has been raised. It shows how many supporters have given. Again, just making sure people don't feel out on their own when they're giving to you. They see that this is kind of a social movement and that you've had progress here. Some of that can even be prepared in advance. Sometimes you can stack up that number of supporters by just farming this out to your consistent donors before you ship it out. But make sure that it feels like this is happening, that people are giving to you and it's an active campaign. Down here, we kind of have a donor comment wall. So anybody who's giving, we can provide a space for them to put a comment in. That those comments show up just to allow those donors to share excitement, share those testimonials as they're giving. And then again, to that form, we're going to look at this next, exactly what a kind of quick giving experience should feel like when you're in that kind of checkout flow. So this is that a checkout flow that Donately has. I think most of the current tools that are out there that people are moving to will have kind of a multi-step speed to conversion layout. This one has some extra bells and whistles, but I'll show you how this can even simplify more. But first off, I like having pre-selects, makes it really easy for people to kind of hand select and get an idea for what they should be giving. I am a big fan of donor pays fees. Pending on the platform, sometimes that can get complicated. There's also this concept of tipping, which I know it drives down the cost of some of these platforms, but for us, we've seen a decline in conversion because of how many steps it can add to your checkout process. So we prefer if people are paying tips, it's quick. You're not doing sliding scales. You're not doing a whole step in your checkout process. It's just a toggle. Let's not overwhelm our donors with anything. If they want to pay to make sure 100% of their donation goes to the cause, that's a radio button. That's not 5 steps of the level of tipping and all of that stuff. So it works, it can work, but I would caution you on doing too much of that in your checkout process. This second phase here is around payment options. Definitely believe giving people different ways to check out, payment wallets, PayPal, ACH, and all of those is just going to make it easier for whatever preference your donors have. Upselling is okay. I know a lot of the platforms will do a slight upsell. Again, if you're looking for somebody to move to recurring, that's great, but it can also deter people from finishing the process. So I would definitely encourage people to A/B test that, a form with that and a form without that. Donately has endless numbers of forms. So if you wanted to see which forms work better, definitely easy to A/B test that functionality. This one also shows transparency with like a donation, almost like a receipt. Sometimes these donation forms, if you're adding, tickets or gala items, you want to make sure they have clarity on exactly what the donation amount is going to be and whether it's one time or recurring, and then follow through or what you're asking people to do once they've donated. So confirmation and sharing, or downloading receipt, logging in to manage donations. Um, that is, in a nutshell, almost everything that I think could be included. What I would encourage is then to take a process like that and test stripping it down as far as you can. So this is donation amount, processing information, and a thank you page. Short, sweet, as quickly as you can move through that process. And any fundraising tool that allows you to get that this simple is going to be one that I would say is worth utilizing, just for that sole purpose of saying, if somebody is motivated to give, I don't want to do anything to slow them down or get in the way. So, um, super helpful there. And then last is A/B testing. So again, whether you're building these pages on WordPress or Webflow or your own site, or using kind of an Insta page, always helpful to build these out in a way that you can test different layouts. So whether you need to make multiple campaigns to just be able to test which one works best, or multiple pages, I would encourage you to do so. And even tools like Google Analytics, you can recognize with a basic form event as a key event, which one is converting more. And then you can narrow in on that, and you can play with images, you could play with layout, you could play with the way that the form is embedded. But I definitely see organizations leaving money on the table when they've only tried one landing page, when you can see pretty drastic shifts with where the form is placed, whether you take a couple fields out, whether you change the image, which for some reason just doesn't have the same emotional connection as a different image that you're using. So definitely want to encourage you to not just run with one look and feel, but really test that a bit to see what is working best. Before I jump into services, I want to pause here, make sure I'm keeping up with comments. So I'm going to pause here and look at these. The ethical way of so cool. Erica's got a reaction to using AI, which I totally appreciate. So Erica's comment: AI built on stolen work, negative impact on the planet. So I think that's probably referring to the massive amounts of electricity use. Like, I totally hear you, Erica. I think it's really tricky to navigate that world ethically. I've actually done a few podcasts on how to try to move into this world in a way that's ethical. And I don't want to downplay that. That's a big deal. But at the same time, there are so many things that it can be used to do in order to research, in order to get ideas out there, and how you could be communicating. So it's probably a whole nother session I can't dive completely into. But if you guys are interested, there's a Times article that she posted. And yeah, just not a fan on driving people to that. Totally understand that. But I think the world that's coming ahead of us is going to have AI, both as tools and ways to get ideas and brainstorm. And I think there's some value inside of it. So definitely not trying to dump everybody towards it like it's a silver bullet, but I think it's a tool that we could be utilizing. Hopefully that helps. Let me know if you guys want me to discuss that further. It seems like a pretty hot topic, and I totally get it. In the creative space, especially, it's really tricky. So lots of tools of value and lots of things to be cautious of. Okay, let's move on then to services or elements that your organization can be doing on more of the brand and strategic side. Again, I'm speaking to what 1550 can offer as an agency. There are plenty of good agencies out there. I think coming to them with any of this input or information could help you drive your stories and your narrative forward. So I want to talk a little bit about first off, brand and brand story. We touched on that earlier. I think really critical that when you get to a place where you want to be able to communicate who you are, what you're doing, and value for your end donor, having your brand story is critical. There are a lot of narratives out there and a lot of tools you can use. The story brand exercise through Donald Miller is a really fantastic way to do this. But in essence, understanding your brand story means you know who you're talking to, you know the global challenge you're trying to face, or the national or the local challenge or problems you're addressing for your end users. You recognize your donors' connection to that and their own personal problems, and then what you are doing to solve that. And you can articulate that quickly and succinctly, and recognize that people want to be included in that story. Next up is your messaging. So inside of that, which you would consider from a brand story, is your messaging. How are you now talking about that? What are your key messages? Right? What are the ways in which you put that into market in different capacities? And then how do you position yourself different from other organizations in that space? Then you have campaigning, which is taking that into market and putting it out in front of people. So the campaign strategy, campaign execution, and really focusing in on parts of that journey that you're going to then introduce donors to. Mapping that whole journey. So where are people going from beginning to end? Um, and then what we call a blueprint is really just looking at all of that holistically and saying, are we finding all the little holes in our brand, and can we solve for those and get more people through to that idea of business growth? So this is probably a little bit of a complex diagram here, but in terms of how we operate as an agency, we look at organizations that come to us with business strategy, which in essence is here we are as an organization, here's the problem we're trying to solve, and here's where we're trying to go, but we need assistance in moving and growing consistently. So to us, just like I talked about, that starts with defining your brand and your brand's purpose, which then overlaps into what are the tools that we have online to disseminate that information to potential donors and volunteers and consumers, which is your digital ecosystem, which a lot of that does come offline, but we kind of are a digital first agency. So then what is that from a website and from a digital brand perspective in the outputs? And then the marketing to us are the rhythms. That's the gas in the gas tank. That's how you're doing things on a regular basis to move forward in hitting those growth metrics. And then we have this tech enablement piece along the bottom because it's so critical that as an agency, you have all the tools in place to do all of that. And we kind of spoke about that already. What's the CRM? What's the kind of composable architecture or the bits and pieces of your technology that allows you to go from one step to the next? So MailChimp or HubSpot, Salesforce, what analytics tools are you using? And if you put that all together, what you can end up with is a great list, kind of a backlog of projects that you need to be addressing to kind of go one piece at a time. So maybe it's a little bit of brand messaging, then it's fixing a little something on the website, then it's improving your Google ad grant, something Community Boost does so well. All right, but you're finding all these little holes in that journey from left to right, and you're plugging them and fixing them as you go. So hopefully that's kind of at least enlightening on some of the elements. I'm going back to this slide, some of the elements that if you feel like that story is hard to tell, areas that you can focus. I skipped past it on an earlier slide, but we did a survey just this past year in 2025 around what people were focusing on. And we did see a really large majority of organizations leaning in on this idea of telling their story being the biggest challenge. That's why I underlined it on the slide a few back, but that's really an area where a lot of people are struggling to shine and differentiate and communicate who they are. So if that's you, you're not alone. I don't know that I've provided you any specific answers to what your messaging should be, but maybe screenshot some of these bullets here as things that you could potentially focus on if telling your story is something that you're struggling to do. And if you want to, we can get to some contact information later for how we can help do that. I wanted to get to showing at least one or two pages that we feel were solid examples of what we did, either as the technology or the agency to kind of put campaigns like this out in the market. So CureBound is an organization here in San Diego. We were running an end of year campaign for them. We did a handful of campaigns around getting people to a bike event and then getting people to a concert. And we wanted to take all these leads and move them through a campaign at the end of the year. And so what we came up with was this concept that resonated well for end of year around this idea of family and of care, of being in community, and this idea that cancer just doesn't care. It doesn't care about your loved ones. It doesn't care about your family. It doesn't care about that empty seat at the table. But we do, and we're cure bound, and we're working to find a cure. And so we came up with a handful of resources. This is kind of just a mishmash of social ads and social posts and elements. And you'll see what we were doing here is really trying to pull on those emotional heartstrings of those moments in people's lives that cancer is getting in the way of, that cancer is taking away from people, and really trying to connect with individuals in those moments to draw that kind of heartstring. Um, we also did a couple of those as animated sequences. I want to make sure these play. So nothing overly crazy here, but again, just leaning in, even if it's subtle, leaning into some of the animated elements that you can do. I think our team even built these ones on Canva this year, or the last year when we ran this. So even getting some movement in. I know some people struggle with having video assets or having a ton of creative assets, but these were really simple ads and elements that we built. This was actually for a prior campaign, for the same organization, but really trying to push for gathering stories and then connecting people. This is what cancer looks like. This is what a world without cancer looks like. And then going into those testimonials. This one was a different campaign, but I at least wanted to show how we were using content and stories and testimonials, user generated content to kind of get into these animated elements of the campaign. And then speaking of conversions, the reason I wanted to talk about this one was really because when we drove people to the original landing page, we had lower than desired conversion rates, right? It was a longer page, and you're seeing it here on the left. It had a lot of really interesting animations, a lot of good storytelling. And yes, all those buttons took you to that conversion. But like I said earlier, form wasn't above the fold, kind of brought it down the page. We knew that going in. And so we also had this shortened version of our ad page or our campaign as a landing, driving specific to different audiences. So one was to capture leads, and to learn what people cared about. The other was this same layout with a donation form that drastically improved the donations, but we also wanted to then do one final push, and the best version, the shortest, cleanest form on page design was this one, which you're seeing here, both in desktop and mobile, because one, we weren't quite sure. So we had to A B test it. As a designer, most of what we're doing is subjective, but some of the rules and learnings that I gave you earlier, this was probably the place we should have started. It's short, sweet, fastest load time, form above the fold, emotional imagery still there. We cut out a lot of the fluff and a lot of the content and really pushed users to understand what we were doing and why we were doing it. Right. So this content here is probably small, kind of hard to read, but really talked about what the organization does. So you knew exactly what you were giving to. And this was the heartstrings, to really connect you to the cause. I also thought maybe it'd be helpful to look at something outside of the nonprofit world, because it's just helpful sometimes to see how scripted this is, how like dialed in this concept is. This is on the left. Optimizely is an A/B testing tool. I'm not going to get into it, but just in pulling some examples, saw this page and thought it might be worth looking at. This left side is their homepage, right? Tons of content, tons of really cool things, tons of testimonials and videos and stuff you can look at. But when you look at their ad landing page, it's none of that stuff. This is literally the entire page, and it's got all of those elements that we've been talking about, right? It's got clarity in what you just searched. It's got trust. You've got trusted by 10,000 orgs. You've got their biggest logos on the screen. You've got the kind of badges and 5-star ratings, 4.5-star ratings on the different places where they're collecting reviews. You have action. Is a little hard black on black to see this, but this is a sign up form right here to just get going. The page is super fast. So again, going back to that UX framework we talked about, this is exactly what you're trying to do. Make that short and sweet and get them converted. I also know I've talked a lot about converting to donations, which is actually a pretty tricky top to bottom ad campaign to run. Oftentimes you may just be wanting to run these ad campaigns to get people just into your lead list or into your potential donor lists and CRM. All the same logic applies. If you're just trying to collect their address, it's getting an email address, getting a name, giving them something in return, some sort of download or an AMA with your CEO, whatever that ends up being. All the same rules apply. I'm just trying to go to the hardest use case, because ads straight to donations can be relatively tricky. So I want to leave some time for questions. I've got a couple last slides here, trying to give you some quick wins, maybe screen cap this or save this as a shot. I'm sure you can get the full deck later, but maybe to hold on to from learnings for today. First off, try to get your impact story understandable in 5 seconds, which is crazy. But if you can get it in a headline or a headline in a description with some visual on that page that gives the donor an idea of what you're doing and what that story is, I think that's what you should be shooting for. We lose people so quickly to page speeds, all those elements, right? If you can be that quick about what it is you're trying to do, super, super important for getting those conversions up. Again, the testimonials, the stats, the feeds, the progress bars, like that all comes later. But that 5 second rule is, can somebody land on that page and understand what it is you're saying and what it is you're asking them to do in less than 5 seconds? Second encouragement here is to cut as much tech complexity as you can. If you just think about how quickly you can tap to pay or Apple checkout, like people are getting very accustomed and very used to moving through the checkout process quickly. So do your best to get that the amount of fields down. You can always ask people stuff later, ask for less things, automate and autofill what you can. The multi-step really gives people a bit of it's a persuasion technique where once they've started, they'll be willing to move through it. So I do encourage that multi-step, but keep that short, keep that as small as you can, and just consider the effects of every single field you add to that form being something that could potentially take away another donor. We talked about A/B testing. Test as much as you can. Duplicate the campaigns, the landing pages. Work with somebody who knows analytics at least enough to give you some insights on what things you're doing that could be improving the conversion rates. And again, AI. I think we're going to move into this in our last 10 minutes. Figure out what versions of that you can adopt, want to adopt. But again, there is, to the comment earlier, right, an ethical version of that. I definitely do not believe in just using it to pump out content. I definitely do not believe in AI to just tell your story. But if you have that story and you can feed it into that system and recognize, like, what are better ways I can say this? What are ways I can say this a little bit faster? How can I get the point across in 5 seconds? It If you're not a writer and you don't have a writer on staff, right, it is something that can speed that up. So I love the idea that we don't have to use it, and we have the design time and the writing time to put full teams on these campaigns. The challenge is just that is becoming harder and harder to do as we move forward. So I would just consider ways that you could use it um, to brainstorm, be creative, learn, and really make the most out of the campaigns that you're running. That's where I want to pause with a few minutes. I'm super happy that I have a few minutes to jump into some of this. Sarah's question around A/B testing, I think it's a great question because a lot of these tools were built in. I used to love Optimizely, and Google kind of shifted away from that when they launched GA4 a bit. But Optimizely is a tool that's out there. And again, you don't have to necessarily use the tools. Some of the landing page tools will do it as well. Instapage is another one. But you could also just make duplicate pages and pop right into Google Analytics to check out what Google Analytics can be telling you. So oftentimes when organizations don't have budgets for any of the A/B testing tools, we'll A/B test inside of just building 2 pages and recognizing the conversion rates and how they're doing. But even tools like MailChimp, you can A/B test subject lines. You can A/B test. Just look in the platforms you're using as a starter point, Sarah, just to see what areas they're already building A/B testing in, and try that. And Sarah, if you jump into the conversation here in the roundtables, I think we're calling them, I'll go into more depth on how we can do that, because there's a few ways I'd love to keep going with that, but I want to cover a couple more of these. Kareem, I think, again, neglecting filthy ads, my guess there is just around the concept of bad ads. Feel free to chime in a little bit more if you want to, but I think what we're striving to do is get in front of people with the right message. And sometimes with a bad agency, bad creative, bad internal team, bad branding, you'll be a little manipulative in that space, right? So it is tricky. It is a balance too. I think back to some of the ads that I have a bad reaction to. It's hard to see PETA ads when they come in, because and we've worked with them in the past. They convert, they work. So how do you find that balance around putting really visceral stuff in there that maybe is challenging for people to see, but actually works? And I think that really goes back to who you are as an organization, who you're talking to, and how do you speak, right? If you have a brand persona that's not going to do that, then you're not going to let your ad teams risk that. You're not going to risk your brand and your relationship with your donors by doing something that's neglectful to that brand. So I definitely think if you're allowing that to go out the door, there's a question around how tight is the brand and can you put some brand rules in place so that those ads just don't pass the sniff test around what we would put out in market. Um, are materials not available today, or am I not seeing the button? I'm not sure what that response is to. If that's around the marketplace, that could be around just linking in and getting access to the builder, which you do have to have a Donately account to build those. But love to answer that further if you. I'll stay in here and answer that further if I get a better understanding what that question was. But all of those are accessible, available, and I'll talk about that in a second, kind of what the pricing is for that. How much should impact play a role in storytelling on an ad landing page? Great question. I think you're going to have to play with it a bit, but what I would say is what we see typically, proof of what you're doing, proof of impact is critical, and you can take that two ways. Proving that where the money is going to go is going to make impact, um, or proof of what the money is going to do. I would just keep proof, trust, and credibility as words in your head because it's what somebody's going to need to see in order to convert, right? So if you're not doing any of those things, I would suggest putting those in there. Impact of the organization, impact of what the dollars will do, dollar handles, all of those to me are showing impact. So hopefully that's helpful just in thinking through some of those techniques. It also it begs the question too of like what you're trying to convert them to. That's much more important bottom of funnel. You could be a little less like tied to exactly what's happening with money if you're going top of funnel. But even there, I feel like it's really important that you're building trust with people who are even giving you email information because they're gonna. What we're trying to do is downstream get them to give, and so I think impact, again, trust, credibility is going to be really important. Even in balancing out what is happening already, and we're only going to see more of, which is just an absolute overwhelm of generated content and what's out there. So I will wrap it up. Last slide. There's my LinkedIn. Feel free to throw those back in the chat, Candace, if you can. If you want an agency audit, there's a link here to contact us, or you can find our contact form. Be happy to jump on a call, look at some of the assets you've got, and potentially connect you with somebody on our team who could do a little bit of an audit and recognizing maybe where we're seeing some opportunity. And then with Donately, we've got an awesome licensing package you can look into, really just going head to head with recognizing organizations are trying to do more with less. That QR code will take you to the page to explain that license a little bit better. But in essence, we want to just do one upfront cost or one upfront payment and zero fees for anything else. So that's no monthly fees, that's no transaction fees. It's just a license to use the tool, and then we don't have to keep charging you over time. It saves when you're talking about raising $1 million, whether that takes you a year or 5 years. This is going to save you $30,000 in terms of other competitors out there, in terms of even our other platform fees or pricing models, and we have those as well. We have zero fees, and you can do transaction costs, but this is the best way to save money and save it in the long run. So wanted to throw that in there as a deal as well. So please look at those. And if I didn't answer anything, love to have you at the table discussion, and I'll give you everything I know.
Thank you so much, Javan. This was such a great session. Thanks for helping us stop that drop off. I am so excited to have you sticking around in the lounge. But before we do that, let's give it up for Javan. I want to see the hands clapping. I want to see all the love for Javan in the chat. Let's get that energy going. I know it's like after lunch, right? So thank you again, Javan, being here. And what a great session. Really, really informative. I would love to let you head on over to the lounge, and I'm going to get some feedback on this session to pass over to you. So everyone here, go ahead. We're going to put that button up so that you can provide feedback on this session and let us know what you thought of the session. Was it helpful for you? Would you learn? So we'll get that up on the stage in just a moment. And thank you again to Javin for spending this time with us today.